everybody, welcome to your master's case tasting of the wines of Höpler. So Höpler is an Austrian producer. You might have noticed them from the C304 cellar. There's a great spread on them. You can learn a little bit more about them here. And Höpler is really a very interesting producer from an area you might be less familiar with in Austria. The area is called the Burgenland. The Burgenland is about 45 minutes southeast of Vienna, and we're just on the northern shores of a very important lake for the area called the Lake Zweigelt. So the lake is very important because it tempers the climate, it provides warming influences in the winter, cooling influences in the summer that are really important to helping the vines thrive in this area. So like a lot of Austria, we're talking about Grüner Veltliner. Grüner Veltliner is the major white grape in Austria and as well in the Burgenland area here. And lovely red grapes as well, native grapes, Zweigelt, and Blaufränkisch are very important, as well as another called Saint Laurent. So the Höpler family had been growing vines for a very long time, back to I think the 1860s. But the modern winery was constructed by Jost Höpler in the 1980s. And since 2007, it's his son, Christoph, who's taken over, and Christoph is also the winemaker. Christoph is really committed to sustainable practices. And so what does this mean? In the vineyards, there are no pesticides or herbicides used, no irrigation. He uses natural composts. The property has a huge array of solar panels, so they have their own electricity source. I believe they're fully autonomous there as well, so that's quite exciting. And bonus, the wines are also vegan friendly. This idea of vegan friendly can be confusing for some people, but essentially what it means is that no animal products are used for the fining of the wine. So sometimes at the end of a wine's aging period, in order for the wines to be really clear, crystal clear and brilliant, with no suspended particles or anything else rendering it cloudy, you would use a fining agent. And these fining agents, they basically will trap all the suspended particles, bring them to the bottom of the wine, and they can then be filtered out. And so some of the products that can be used, egg whites, gelatins, things like that, obviously are not suitable for vegans. So when a wine is vegan friendly, it means that only bentonite, for example, which is a type of clay, or other non-animal products are used in the fining of the wines. So there's a little extra for you from the Höpler wines. So this is a 50-hectare estate, and as I said, on the northern shore of Lake Zweigelt in a sub-region called the Lethenberg Hills. So it's a very hilly area, obviously, with diverse soils that in some areas are quite sandy, in other areas very chalky. So the sandy areas tend to give quite a silky expression to the wines. The chalky limestone areas, very refreshing. It's like mineral tinge, a bit of a firmer structure to them. But this is the Lethenberg Hills, a very high quality sub area of the Burgenland for producing Austrian whites, Grüner Veltliner again, as I mentioned, and reds, Zweigelt and Blaufränkisch. And what's great about this master's case is we have these 3 different varieties, so you can really taste the typical signature grapes from the area from this really excellent producer. So enough on the producer, on the region, let's jump into the tasting. That's always the fun part, right? All right, so we're gonna get started. Obviously, we're gonna start with the white. So this is the Pannonica Grüner Veltliner. So Pannonica, why this name? It comes from the major climate influence in the area, Pannonian climate. And this is just a play on the name Pannonica. And the Pannonian climate that affects this part of Austria is actually quite a warm, temperate climate influence. So the Pannonica Grüner Veltliner. Grüner Veltliner from other parts of Austria can be really nervy. Sometimes I call it almost a mix between a Riesling and a Chablis. But here, because we've got these more warm climate influences, you get all that lovely citrusy, lively fruit, but you also get slightly riper nuances, slightly rounder body on this as well. So the first thing we're gonna do when we're tasting these wines is we're going to just take a look at it. So we've got a lovely pale lemon color, you can see, brilliant, crystal clear. The next thing we're gonna do is take our time, giving it a nice little swirl. and nosing it. I like to nose it first to get my initial impressions, then I give it a swirl to let some oxygen in, and then I'll just give it a second nosing. And then I really find that this wine, as I mentioned, has all these lovely citrusy notes, even some white blossoms, white floral notes, underlying mineral notes. When I say mineral, I often mean the smell, let's say, of a stony area when it's just been rained on, and you get those sort of almost flinty notes, but not quite. And then underlying, I have that riper influence I was talking about, some of those stone fruits, hints of apricot and peach that are quite lovely. I'm spitting. It's the morning here where I'm tasting, but you go ahead and enjoy your wine. So this wine has a really lovely, vibrant acidity to it. It's refreshing, lip smacking. It's fairly light to medium, I'd say, in body, but it's got a lovely roundness to it that really is a great balance against that nervy acidity. Really refreshing, as I said, on the palate with all of those notes I was mentioning on the nose. We're coming back full force in terms of the flavors, all that lovely citrus, some yellow appley notes, and then some apricot notes as well, but with that underlying earthiness, hint of savoriness that's really nice. And then on the finish, which is surprisingly long, you have just a hint of salinity, which again, I would put in the camp of sort of mineral type nuances you can get on wines like that. So a super refreshing wine that drinks really, really well on its own if you're gonna serve it for an aperitif with your friends. But it's also a great wine that pairs very easily with things like sushi, any sort of lightly spiced Asian fish dishes, or if you want to go traditional, you could pair this with a pork schnitzel, for example. So the next wine that we're going to try is, as I said, a native grape to Austria called Zweigelt. So Zweigelt is actually a crossing of two other Vitis vinifera grapes, Blaufränkisch and Pannonica. Again, both native to the area. So Zweigelt is the most popular red grape, most planted red grape in Austria. It's really interesting. It has quite a deep color and really tangy aromas and flavors. Think cranberry, sour cherry, some herbal notes, sometimes light spice, but yeah, really lively and refreshing. That bright acidity, medium to full body, and then fairly approachable tannins. Can be firm on some occasions, but generally fairly approachable. So these are wines served slightly chilled that are super, super refreshing, very easy drinking, and pair well again with a whole range of foods. I'll give this one a try and we'll see what really works with this specific wine. So as you can see, this is quite a fairly deep color, somewhat translucent in the mid, but as you can see, it's more on the dark ruby spectrum. So again, starting with a nose, initial scent, and then giving it a swirl. And again, as I said, I'm getting those lovely sort of tangy red fruit, but also those deeper dark fruit notes as well. And then, as I mentioned, bright acidity, bright crunchy fruit, that red to dark spectrum, very tangy, very lively. Quite smooth, the tannins are there. They have a nice structural frame to give to the wine, but they're not at all overpowering or overly firm. This is already quite an approachable wine. As I said, a great wine to serve slightly chilled, because then it's really gonna make those really bright flavors pop even more. And that lovely acidity is really going to counterbalance rich flavors well. So aubergine fritters would be an interesting choice here. Barbecue, anything barbecued ribs or something like that with the barbecue sauce. This would be a fun wine again for that counterbalance. Pumpkin soup, a spiced pumpkin soup could even work well because, as I said, it's medium to full body, but it's not overpowering. It is quite refreshing, so it wouldn't overpower even just a hearty soup like that. Or a cheese with a medium sort of flavor set, like maybe a Gouda, a Comté, something along those lines could work quite well here. So now we're going to move to the last wine, which is the Blaufränkisch, the 2020 vintage Blaufränkisch. So Blaufränkisch, another very popular red grape for all of Austria, but its stronghold really is in the Burgenland here, where Höpler is based. And Blaufränkisch often has a lot of spice, a lot of dark fruit to it, some hint of woodland notes as well. Tends to be quite full-bodied, and the tannins can go from rounded to quite firm depending on how it's made. It can be unoaked, as is the style here and was with the Zweigelt as well, but it's also a grape that can do quite well with a little bit of oak aging and can be quite age-worthy. So Blaufränkisch, quite a diverse personality, a stylistic expression, but a really popular, important grape for Austria in general. So again, we have quite a similar color here, more on the dark ruby spectrum, not, you know, inky dense, but fairly dark. And then on the nose, we definitely have darker fruit happening here. Dark cherry, cassis, plum, notes like that, and then some nice sort of clove, hints of spice, hints of cedar. Very attractive, very clean. Again, as is typical really for all of these Austrian wines, that really bright, fresh acidity. It's quite smooth, fuller bodied. The tannins, again, they're present. There's a hint of a firmness to the tannins, but still very approachable. This is a one you could even decant if you wanted to, half an hour before serving. Again, serve just slightly chilled to really bring out those flavors, but not too cold. And this also has quite a range of dishes that it could pair with. Here you might get into a Wiener Schnitzel, the veal schnitzel, which is a typical classic dish from Austria. So if you like the Zweigelt and or the Blaufränkisch and you wanted to pick up another case of these wines, they are back in cellar 315, so don't hesitate to check them out.